Hello, it's time for War Room with LanceWallnau and my trusty Cato sidekick. Actually, I can't say Cato because that's an institute. But anyway, Mercedes Sparks is right here with us. Green Hornet and Cato. Wasn't that what it was? All right.
You just said it was time for War Room. This is Firewall. We just got done with War Room.
Oh.
It's time for Firewall.
It's time for Firewall. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Firewall. It's time for us to get clear on what's happening in America, and that's why this program is so important. All right, now, what I want to do is I want to focus in on the spate of legislation that's coming in right now, and this legislation stuff that's coming in is so radical, it's even taking the radicals by surprise. And I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. We actually said this. I predicted this in a book that came out before the election, that we were going to experience what would feel like a hijacking of the political system by radical left activists who were going to storm the cockpit, and there was going to be an agenda that would literally become like a religious crusade under the guise of equality. They were going to cram every eccentric, extreme, radical bill through that they could, because the political class in the Democratic Party, I'm sorry to say it, a lot of the Republican Party, are just accommodating the momentum of lawlessness. And this is a curious thing. I don't have a Bible up here, but you know, one of the characteristics of the last days is a tsunami of lawlessness. And so many of you are frustrated. I hear what you're saying. I get your comments all the time. What about the elections, Lance, if we can't trust the election? Well, we're going to give you some updates on that, because you can't give in to the lawlessness. You are the firewall that has to literally arrest the lawlessness. And what you're watching is lawless legislation from lawless people. And trust me, there's a divine providence working on a great awakening. There is a fourth turning that we are in, like Steve Bannon talks about. But before Steve talked about it, I was talking about it, and then I discovered Steve. The fourth turning refers to a period of time, an epical period of time, every 80 to 100 years of American history, when there's a shift in our national dialogue, in a crisis of definition as to who we are as a nation and if we will survive as a nation. And the hand of providence put you here at this very time for that battle. So, having given that preamble to the message, I want us to take a look at the Equality Act. And I love how the left always comes up with these words, Mercedes, that sound so right. We have to do a segment on this, because if the left calls it equality, I promise you, it's not an Equality Act. It's an unfair distribution of power act. And so the Equality Act is literally out to hunt religious freedom. Remember, all of these things, I'm going to prove it to you mathematically. I'm going to show you in a second how these agenda items are actually not even representative of the need in the United States, but rather of the political will to crush the opposition of the Marxist Democrat Party. So this bill, which would add sex, gender identity and sexual orientation to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, was approved. Approved, mind you, 224 to 206. That's what I'm saying. America is electing congressmen who approved this. 224 to 206. Have we lost our collective minds, with 3 Republicans voting in favor of the measure? And so here's what I want you to catch, that this bill is actually going to force government-mandated, remember what I said, this is all a counterfeit religion. This is all operating under the guise of civil rights, but it's actually a fake religion. So therefore, they're going to go to the schools and churches and the hospitals and force the government's going to force us to accept beliefs about sexual orientation and gender identity. If someone is biologically male, but they say, I'm a female today, then the teacher has to deny what they know and call the student. This is already in the universities, but it's working its way down to lower and lower grades, so that your children, before they even understand sexuality, are now being propagandized into thinking that maybe I'm not a guy, maybe I'm a girl, maybe I'm not a girl, maybe I'm a guy. So it's going to threaten everyday speech. You could be fined or lose your job for using the wrong name or pronoun. You could be deplatformed. I could be deplatformed for not using the appropriate pronoun. If Mercedes decides tomorrow that she's a guy, I have to look at her and you have to know that she is not a guy, but then you have to call her a guy or Mr. Sparks, and you have to do that under the threat of this legislation. I'm going to stop now. Mercedes, it goes from here to the absurd, but do you have any comments to make before we go to the Matt Gaetz segment from CPAC?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a real danger to actual free speech. And so as a woman, you know, it's scary to see female sports really be ripped from female hands. I mean, there's so many athletes out there, girls who are training since childhood in sports like track, basketball, and who are vying for college scholarships, and those are being ripped away from them by biological males who are identifying as a woman. And so, you know, I mean, I look at it and it's just, you know, women, I don't know where the women's lib movement is on this. It seems to just be Republican women, conservative women standing up for actual women's issues. So that's one of my biggest concerns. And, you know, I was going to rip a page from Lucas Mather, Professor Lucas Mather. You know, he works at a college, and, you know, they open these days with colleges of, hey, what's your personal pronouns? What do you like to be identified as? And he goes, well, my personal pronoun is Jesus Christ is Lord. So I'm going to need you to refer to me like that from moving forward. So it's got some real implications to this of, like, you know, with the insanity of the left, like, what rules will they abide by, and, you know, what can conservatives do with them? So those are my thoughts.
But before we go to Matt, let me just say this. I want to make this point. The Equality Act will use the force of law across all 50 states to strip Christian and other religious ministries of their right, get this one, to hire people of shared faith to pursue a shared mission. Can you imagine a Christian organization being forced to hire an atheist or Satanist to teach its youth at a retreat? I mean, this actually, you say that's absurd. Well, guess what? The funny thing is, you ever hear of Babylon Bee? Babylon Bee is a satirical site. I think it's like a Christian site that started off with just poking fun at the eccentricities and the hypocrisies of religious movements. But in over like 9 occasions, their jokes ended up being historic facts. In other words, the absurd can actually happen. And so when you think about Mr. Potato Head or Barbie coming under attack by the woke generation, it's the material of a stand-up comedy routine, except that it's not comedy anymore. It's Democrat legislation. Let's go hear what Matt has to say.
American business should be worried about business, not wokeism. We gather here today in the shadow of Disney, a corporation that recently canceled its own founder, Walt Disney. Look out, Mr. Potato Head, you're next. I'm sorry, I think now he's going by Potato X. Can't be Mr. Potato. And see, to me, the whole concept of the Mr. Potato Head was he could move the parts around. I mean, Mr. Potato Head was America's first transgender doll, and even he got canceled.
So I'm trying to figure this. I cannot keep up. I cannot keep up. And I've got vast news sources at my fingertips that Disney was canceling Walt Disney. I mean, this is hilarious. That's like NASA canceling rockets. So what I want to know, Mercedes, is you have a child. You are more in touch with the toy world than me, although Mr. Potato Head was around since I was a kid, and I loved all those interchangeable parts, and I kept losing them. But what can you enlighten us with regarding this cancel culture war on even the toy box?
Yeah, well, you know, everybody's getting more and more woke. And so in an effort to, I guess, what do they say? Promote, I've got some articles up here. We could throw them up on the screen here. But in order to promote gender equality and being gender neutral, it was widely reported this week that Mr. Potato Head is no longer a Mr. And I don't think anyone was more shocked by this than Mrs. Potato Head. Because, I mean, that's quite, I mean, this is, he just, Caitlyn Jenner, his whole being. So shocking. Now it's just going to be 42 accessories basically you get in a box, and you can identify your own potato as a Mr., a Mrs., an it, a they, a them, whatever they'd like to go by. And so, you know, we keep going. Let's go to my next slide here. We got the next one. Like I said, no one more surprised by this than Mrs. Potato Head. And it was reported that she is on the lookout for her angry eyes. So if you have Mrs. Potato Head's angry eyes, please pass them along to her. And so here we go. You know, Mr. Potato Head is joining the Land O'Lakes Butter Lady, Aunt Jemima, the guy on the rice box, and these football teams, the Chiefs, the Indians. Bye-bye, Mr. Potato Head. We'll miss you. And so here's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling like I like how it's just slides on the screen. It doesn't cut to me, but it's just, we're going to have slides. We're just going to go with it. But here's what I'm proposing. I'm proposing we lean into this absurdity. And I can always remember, you know, the guy, James O'Keefe, with his absurdity on college campus over at Rutgers, and he had them remove Lucky Charms because it was offensive to Irish Americans, and they agreed to remove it. So I'm saying let's lean into this. I think we need to transition from Lincoln Logs, and Lincoln is now offensive. I don't know if you know this, but even though he freed the slaves, the left is very frustrated with him and want to remove his statue. We need to change him to Hamilton Logs. That's what I'm thinking. I think we just need to go ahead, change Lincoln Logs to Hamilton Logs. And you know what? I also think Hungry Hungry Hippos needs to change from Hungry Hungry Hippos. Hippos is offensive, clearly. Hungry Hungry Semi-Aquatic Mammals. That's what I'm going for. I think we're going to need to transition to that. So I know we only got a couple minutes left in this segment. Lots more to talk about. And we got a lot coming up here in the next couple of seconds. We're going to go live to CPAC. So we'll see you there. Couple minutes.
As a pandemic wreaks havoc and angry mobs burn our cities, LanceWallnau explains why this is happening and takes you into the ancient text he describes as God's Chaos Code. This is the exciting sequel to Lance's best-selling book, God's Chaos Candidate, where he predicted Donald Trump would be president. God's Chaos Code predicts this exact moment in history and what is coming next.
When you're in the midst of shaking and uncertainty, the one thing that can give you confidence is knowing what God has said about the time that you're in. If the Lord tells you ahead of time what's going to happen, you can be certain things are going to be working out. The Lord has given us that code in the Bible. He's told us what's coming in America, what's coming to the nations. He's literally given us the chaos code. We can understand what's happening and be awakened in the midst of it. You need to understand and get this chaos code.
You need to know the code. Order God's Chaos Code now at godschaoscode.com.